Good morning, boys and girls. Today, I'm going to teach you how to identify the main topic of a text and the focus of paragraphs in the text. So, in this lesson, we will read and understand science text.
Do you ever wonder, what could you do with worm spit? Let's read to find out.
I'm already curious because ew, who wants to wear worm spit?
Wearing Worm Spit by Helena Nowicki.
Before you read, do you know what thread is? If you do, tap the picture that shows thread. If you don't, tap the question mark to learn more.
You got it! Are you ready to read Wearing Worm Spit? Let's go!
Think about the clothing you wear. You wear socks, shirts, pants, and more. Would you wear clothing made from worm spit? Worm spit. Would you? Would anyone? This woman does.
Look at the picture. What is the woman wearing that could be made from worm spit?
So I'm thinking back about what the front cover looked like, and then also at the beginning it says clothing that we wear. So I think I'm going to choose a dress.
That's it!
Beautiful silk clothing starts with spit from inside a silkworm's mouth. The silkworm's spit or saliva has special proteins in it. These proteins connect to make one long thread. Each thread is about 1 mile long. That's longer than 100 school buses lined up end to end. Wow. And when I'm reading nonfiction text, I always want to make sure I study the illustrations and then also read what's under the illustrations. Silkworms use their saliva to make many long threads. They wrap the threads around themselves. So that's what I see in the picture. But I also want to go back up because I wasn't quite sure about proteins and it's blue, so I can click on it. So proteins are small parts of all living things. So that really helps me to understand what I just read. So the worm's silkworm spit or saliva has proteins in it. Okay.
What is this paragraph mostly about?
So I need to think about what is it talking the most about. So is it talking about how spit becomes thread, where clothing is made? Didn't really tell me anywhere anything was made. What silkworm proteins are. Hmm. So I'm already thinking, should it be how spit becomes thread? Is that what this paragraph mostly talks about? Let me go back and read just to make sure. Beautiful silk clothing starts with spit from inside a silkworm's mouth. The silkworm's spit or saliva has special proteins in it. These proteins connect to make one long thread. Each thread is about 1 mile long. That's longer than 100 school buses lined up end to end. So I'm thinking this whole entire paragraph is talking mostly about how spit becomes thread. Even though it does mention the proteins, it doesn't really tell me a lot about the proteins.
That's right!
Let's keep reading. It takes 3 days for a silkworm to make this long thread. A worm wraps the thread around itself again and again. This work creates a white, fluffy cocoon. The cocoon thread is called raw silk. Raw silk is delicate. Many cocoon threads must be used to make raw silk strong enough to make clothing. It takes thousands of cocoons to make enough silk for just one dress. And here are some illustrations. This one shows what the little cocoons look like, and then it gives you the visual of the dress. This silk dress is made from thousands of cocoons. And I'm going to go click this blue word delicate just so I can get the definition and the understanding. So delicate is something that is delicate is easy to break. So if it's delicate, that means it might break very easily. So that means raw silk can be broken fairly easily.
What does the first paragraph mostly tell about?
So now I got to think about this first paragraph. So I'm looking and I notice that there are two paragraphs, paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. So I have to be very careful not to think about both paragraphs because it asked me about the first one. So let me go back and reread that first paragraph just to be sure I know what it's talking about. It takes 3 days for a silkworm to make this long thread. A worm wraps the thread around itself again and again. This work creates a white, fluffy cocoon. The cocoon thread is called raw silk. So is that paragraph talking about how strong many threads are? No. How a silkworm makes raw silk, it did talk about that. How a dress is made from cocoons. Now that was more in the second paragraph. So I'm going to go with this one.
Yes, good thinking.
Let's keep reading to learn more. People who make silk cloth need many cocoons. They get the cocoons from silkworm farmers. These farmers raise many silkworms at a time. They start with the eggs of silk moths. The eggs hatch into caterpillars. The caterpillars eat and grow. Then each caterpillar makes a cocoon. So I'm going to stop and look at this illustration of the farmer and some things that he has that looks like the little cocoons. So the farmer collects silkworm cocoons into a basket. So that's what he's doing. These little white things are the silkworm cocoons.
What does this paragraph tell about? Complete the sentence.
So I'm thinking about what the paragraph is telling me about. So this paragraph tells how farmers grow silkworms into, do they grow the worms into moths, eggs, or cocoons? And if I go back and look into the paragraph, these farmers raise many silkworms at a time. They start with the eggs of silk moths. The eggs hatch into caterpillars. The caterpillars eat and grow. Then each caterpillar makes a cocoon. So that silkworm grows into cocoons.
Yes, you figured it out.
So make sure when you're reading nonfiction text like this, and when we're talking about specifically science text, your brain has to do a little bit more work. So you're going to have to read, then go back and reread, look at the illustrations, read the information under or around the illustrations so that you're understanding what it is mostly talking about, and more specifically when you need to understand a particular paragraph, you can go back and talk about what that paragraph is about. So let's keep reading to find out some more. Farmers collect the cocoons. They boil them in huge pots. This loosens the cocoons so that the threads will not break. And I'm thinking back and I remember that word delicate, meaning that it's easy to break. Silk makers wind the threads of raw silk into spools. They dye the silk threads. Then they use machines to weave the colorful threads into cloth. So I'm looking at this illustration of the workers, and they have these baskets that look like it has the cocoons in it. So silk makers are busy turning threads of raw silk into cloth. And I have a blue word here, weave. Let me make sure I'm clicking to understand the definition of that. Weave. When you weave, you cross threads over and under each other to make cloth. Huh, interesting.
What is this page mostly about? Add the main topic to the chart.
All right, so what is this page mostly about? So let's think about the main topic. Would it be how to make silk threads into cloth, how to make silk threads loose, or how to make silk threads colorful? So if I look here, farmers collect and boil the threads, silk makers wind and dye the threads, silk makers weave the threads into cloth. So what are these three key details mostly talking about here? How to make silk threads into cloth. That sounds pretty good. How to make silk threads loose. No, I didn't just talk about only that. And how to make silk threads colorful. It did mention it, but it's not mostly about that. So I'm going to use how to make silk threads into cloth.
Right. Way to work it out.
Silk cloth is soft and smooth. It can be dull or shiny. It's used to make dresses, suits, shirts, pants, and ties. Silk is unusual. It can warm you in cold weather. In hot weather, silk feels cool on your skin. The next time you see someone wearing a beautiful dress, you might ask, is it worm spit? If that dress is made of silk, the answer is yes. And I'm looking here, they give me some examples of the suit and the dresses that are made from silk. And I read what's up under the illustration. The man's tie and the woman's dress are made from silk.
What is this whole text mostly about? Each sentence.
So now I have to think about everything that I've read. And so as I think about the whole entire text and each paragraph within the text, now I need to complete the sentences that tells me what the whole text was mostly about. Worm spit can be used to make clothing. Proteins in worm spit connect to make one long thread. A silkworm wraps the thread around itself to make a cocoon. Farmers raise silkworms and collect the cocoons. Silk makers use these cocoons to turn thread into cloth.
Yes, you got it.
Cool! You can make clothes from worm spit.
What will you read about next?
So remember, today we learned how to identify the main topic of a text and how to focus on paragraphs within that text. We really dug deep into a science text, and we learned that when we're reading these types of text, our brain has to do a little bit more work. So sometimes we have to go back and read again. And sometimes after we read the question, we may need to go back in the text to find the answer.